but I need to, okay, that's fine. Yeah, I can provide the recording later. Okay, right. So here, when we consider these in-text citations that we were talking about, you can either do it as direct quotations, but as I told already, so it has to be below 10%, right? And then the rest you can paraphrase. Paraphrase in the sense, it is not like that you are just taking the information and rewriting in your own words, right? And without, as in, let's say that you're not giving the credit to the author. It is not like that. You have to give the due credit to the author as well, right? So, direct quotations and paraphrasing. But remember, as in the majority of the ideas that you are presenting via your research paper should be your own original ideas. So there can be direct quotations, there can be paraphrasing, right? But you need to bring up your own argument, right? That originality should be there, right? So we will go through this referencing thing later, as in we will do a separate lesson on in-text citations and also these citations list and everything. But here the point that we need to understand under this model, under this 5 pass reading model, and specifically under this pass 5 research integration, you can decide what you are going to cite, right? So if I'm to show you an example from a research paper, let me share my screen. So here we have this Google Scholar platform. If time permits, I will show you some other research databases as well, like ResearchGate, JSTOR, Academia, and all these other platforms. So for the moment, if we just type something related to your study area, let's take mindfulness, right? So here you get several articles. So here you can see cited by this number. Likewise, those are mentioned here. So I'm just trying to show an in-text citation here, the way that we can cite an article. Yeah. So here you can see the referencing list, which is placed towards the end of the article. So the due credit is given to the authors. So this would be the full reference, and then let me show you an in-text citation. That means when you cite something, when you refer to an argument presented by an author, right, by another author, then you have to mention their names. So here you can see, here I'm highlighting. I hope the screen is visible. If not, you may let me know. All right. Okay. So here you can see, right? The authors' names are given and also the year. So there are slight differences when we consider different referencing systems. When we consider Harvard and Chicago, APA, MLA, likewise, there are differences. So we will go through those later. So I just wanted to show you an example about citing this point. Right, okay. Then we will move to the presentation. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So we were referring to this first step, citing. And also in this reading model, right? So we have this next step, challenge, right? So here you need to ask this question from yourselves, when to challenge, right? When you are reading a paper. So it is not like that you need to blindly believe everything which is mentioned in that paper. It is not like that. You can challenge those arguments, but of course you have to be sensible there. So let's say that the research paper you are reading, so there is some sort of a methodological inadequacy, let's say. So you don't quite agree with the method, right? So that means you think the approach can be improved. You can say that the approach cannot adequately address the phenomenon which is being discussed, right? And also methodology may not be very strong. Not only the methodology, right? The arguments, the themes. So if you find such issues, then you can challenge the paper. It is not like that you are directly confronting the author and challenging that person. It is not like that you can academically challenge that paper. As in, you can challenge it using your own thinking. You can just argue, right? Within yourself, you can have that argument. So from there, you can also find your research gap as well. So there is this part which is not explored much, right? So likewise, you can address those, I would say, faults, or as in, inadequate points in your own research paper, right? Maybe your research paper can be a conference paper, right? Likewise, whether your research is something big or can be an abstract, right? Can be a journal article or can be your MPhil or PhD research. So when you engage in academic reading, you can find these challenging points, right? And then you can find your research gap also when you engage in academic reading. And then also you have this building upon a step, right? So that means when you consider a research paper, you can build your argument based on the argument which is given in one of these research papers. You can challenge it, and also you can build your own argument upon one of the arguments given in the research paper that you are reading, right? The research paper or book, whatever the academic text that you are reading. So you can elaborate on a specific topic. So let's say if you consider something like, let's say, feminism, right? So under feminism, you have several arguments. So it is not about kind of, empowering females. It is not like that. There are several arguments. So there is this argument presented by Ellen Showalter. So there is this argument about gynocriticism. That means stuff, or as in, research done by women. So then we call it gynocriticism. So then likewise, you have different areas that you can follow, right? So let's consider a concept. Let's say you consider Zen stories, right? So how is death represented in Zen stories? So then you are trying to find out more evidence for that. So likewise, you can build upon the argument, your own argument. And also, there is this possibility, right? That means discarding. Here you can see the last step, discarding. So what do we mean by discarding? As in generally, any idea? I'm not asking about the research context. What do we usually, as in a kind of a general context, what do we mean by discarding?
So I think discard means you give up something. So in this context, if the text is not relevant to the topic that you have chosen, then you can just give it up.
Exactly, right? So that means you can just ignore what is not necessary. So that's why I told you, when you are engaging in academic reading, so it is not like spoon feeding. It is not like that you are taking everything which is there. So we need to be very critical when we are reading a text. What is necessary and what is not necessary? That means you can discard what is irrelevant to your project. So I have received some messages as well. Right. So Mr. Michael is asking, can we get access to other universities' online libraries? Okay, so if you are asking this related to institutional access, as in whether you can access those via, yeah.
Asking because certain universities, they have agreements and students from one university can use the library of the other university.
Yeah.
So,
All right,
and I
Mr.
think
Michael. Yeah,
Orlando University.
I get your question. So I am a visiting lecturer, so I don't have a very clear picture about the institutional setting. So, but I will be directing this question, right, to the relevant, I would say, the authorities. Whether it is possible or not, we will get to know, as in we will get it clarified. All right. Okay. So that is about discarding. So that means after kind of thorough analysis, if it kind of doesn't advance your inquiry, and if something is methodologically incompatible, right, to your research, and if there is better scholarship, then you can avoid that research paper. So can you remember that we discussed about reading only the abstract? Sometimes you can just read the abstract, then you can get a clear picture, a lucid picture, whether this is relevant or not. Likewise, right? Yeah. So that's why we say that reading can change your research map. So you might have some sort of an idea in your head that this is my research problem and this is the area that I'm kind of basing my research on. But the more you read, right? So there is this possibility that your research map might change, right? Yeah. And also, when you read, and so as I mentioned earlier as well, so we will check whether this institutional access is possible. Even if not, Mr. Michael and also the others, if you are interested in reading the stuff, so there are several platforms that you can use as well. So if time permits, because we have only 1 hour today, I'm not very sure, but during one of these online sessions, so I will be showing how to access all these different research databases. As in, there are some, as in databases which are free to use, at least to a considerable level. So if we consider JSTOR, so I will be just showing you JSTOR. Give me a minute. Yeah. So here, if we consider JSTOR, when you log into your JSTOR account, you can access several articles. So here we have this. I have just typed meditation here. It is something related to your study area. So you get several results, and some papers, of course, you can read online, and some you can download as well. So some are partially available. So let's click on this. So here you have this read online option, right? Yeah. So you have 100 articles per month which you can access, right? So here you don't have to pay, you can access them. So sometimes it might not be the entire article, right? Can be the abstract. Sometimes it is the entire article. Likewise, there are different databases. So when we are doing this course, we will time to time access these databases, and then I will be showing you how to use them. Some of you might already know. So yeah, so that is just an example. All right, let's go back to the lesson. Okay, so if you have any questions, you may ask. And then we'll be moving to, yeah, the next reading technique. So here, now in the modern context, we have to identify, as in when we look at an entity, right? Whatever the entity is, whatever the context is, we need to look at things with multiplicity, with multiple perspectives. So now it is not like, only one perspective, one single perspective. It is not like that. And also, there are no binary oppositions like black and white. So, here we need to look at things with multiplicity. So that is what actually meant by this layered reading technique. So here it means you have to read a text multiple times, not just once or twice, so at least thrice, I would say. So if a research paper interests you, right? If it captures your attention, as in if it is very much related to your research area, right? Then you should read it, I would say, at least thrice. As in, reading multiple times is very important. And also, when you are doing this multiple reading, so just reading it for the sake of reading is also not enough. You have to read this with multiple perspectives and also focusing on different areas. And that's why here we have three phases. So the first one would be first reading. And also this doesn't mean that you can just, read it for like thrice and then you can just ignore the text. It is not like that. If you want to read and if you want to explore more, you can read it several times. So here, this would be just a model that for us to gain kind of a better understanding of academic reading, how to do the academic reading in a better manner. All right. So that day also we discussed about methodology. I think you have a separate, lesson, as in a kind of a course on methodology as well. So here, what I'm referring to as methodology is, on one hand, again, it is not just one single thing that we refer to as methodology. So it refers to the theoretical framework and also the way that you engage in your research. What are the methods used by you? Is it qualitative, and also it is quantitative, and also whether you are using interviews, whether you are using Google Forms, likewise, what are your data collection methods, right? All these things, again, kind of I would say, an integration, right? The way you collect data, right? What are the methods which are used by you to analyze those data, and what are the theories you are going to incorporate? What is your theoretical lens? All these things are integrated. Right. Okay. So again, there's another question regarding this institutional access. Yeah. Okay. So let me share the presentation. Okay. Right. So here, in this first reading phase, you can just do a surface reading, right? So that means you are just exploring the key argument, and you can look at the structure of the research paper if you are reading a research paper. So what is the research question of this paper? If you are reading an academic text, an academic book, what is the main argument or main arguments, right? Yeah. And as in, what are the main claims? You can distinguish the main claims. And what is the purpose of all these major sections? As in, how does each chapter or section serves a specific function, right? How does it establish the context? How does it review literature, right? How, let's say, the evidence would be presented, how the objections are addressed, right? If there are any. Likewise, that would be the first reading, as in that is done, I would say, in a surface level. And after that, you have the second reading. So here, I already answered your question. What do we refer to as methodology here? So specifically at this stage, you need to identify what is the theoretical position of the scholar, right? So there are several theories now. Let's say there is structuralism, right? Post-structuralism, And also, there are all these theories like deconstruction. And here, even though deconstruction is identified as something very much Western and something very much modern, so when you look at a concept like anatma, likewise, so there are several research done on this aspect, as in this deconstruction aspect in Buddhism as well. So these things are very much relatable. Those are not like far-fetched concepts to your study area. And also regarding the method, so there can be different methods. If you remember, we discussed about close textual analysis that day, right? So engaging in a very close reading of the text. And also there is this idea called ethnographic observation. So that means you are literally living inside a community to understand their purposes, to understand their setting better, to engage in a research based on that community likewise. And also other than textual analysis, I'm just giving some examples. So there can be comparative analysis. That means you are comparing and contrasting different perspectives or different texts, right? So let's say Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism likewise. So you are engaging in a comparative analysis. So let's say that you are doing a research on the concept of death, and you are referring to the Mahayana, as in, the genre, and also the Theravada genre. Then you are doing a comparative analysis, how the same concept is addressed in different manners. And also, you can refer to the data collection methods, right? As we already discussed, what are the primary sources, what are the secondary sources, right? Whether lived experience is utilized likewise. And then the third reading. So when you do this third reading, you have to dig deeper into the text, right? So you need to look at the gaps and silences, and also the ideological positions of the writer. So that day also we discussed, when we look at a text, so we are not going to look at only what is presented in the text, right? So what is not presented or what is absent is also important. So let's say in a research paper, only the Western perspective is given, and we can say the Eastern perspective is missing, right? Then you can see, so there is a silence in that text, which we need to understand, right? So whether that silence is colonial or post-colonial, likewise, we need to kind of dig deeper into that as well, right? Yeah. As in whose voices appear and whose voices are silenced likewise. So those things we can identify when we are engaging in this third reading, right? And this is not about the number. It doesn't mean that you are reading this for just one time and then you are reading it twice, then thrice. It is not like that. It is not about the number of, as in the time that you are reading the text, right? So it is the weight, or it is the depth that you incorporate with the text. And here we can do a layered reading when we meet physically. So we have less than 30 minutes more. So because of that, we cannot waste time on kind of, doing an activity here. And it is not very practical to do a writing activity in an online class, because I'm meeting most of you physically. This Saturday, we will engage in a layered reading. And also then we can go through I would say the arguments that you come across, right? So you can have different perspectives about the same text, again, referring to multiplicity, multiple perspectives, right? So we will do that when we meet this Saturday, right? Okay. Then if we move to the next reading technique that I have mentioned here, right? So we call this dialogic reading. Again, a very modern reading method. So here what we are doing is we are reading with the text. We are not reading under it or reading above it. Any idea? What does this mean? What do you mean by reading with the text? Not reading under the text or not reading above the text? Can you all share some insights with us? Yes, please.
is it like you treat like the author as on the same level as you and not treat him as an authority or as somebody that's below you? Is it like that?
Yes, I agree to a certain extent. Yes, it is like that you are considering the author as someone not above you or under you. So it is like that. It is not exactly treating him or her as kind of, I would say, on a similar level, but you are engaging in kind of a discourse with the author, right? Yeah. So that means you are treating the author in a way as a debate partner. You are engaging in this debate or discourse, right? Or just a discussion, I would say. It is not kind of a very passive comprehension of a text. So the author is not someone who is very distanced from us. So when we read a text, if we are just kind of going for a passive comprehension, we are just passively taking everything, right, which is mentioned. And if we are trying to memorize everything, that would do no good for a researcher, I would say, right? So we should not get spoon-fed from the text. Active interaction with the text is very much necessary here. And when you engage with the text, you can ask these marginal questions, right, from yourself, right? So you can engage in this discussion with the author. For that, the author does not have to be present in front of you. You can have this intellectual, invisible discourse, invisible discussion with that writer or with that researcher. So here when you refer to a point, so here we have this question, why assume this? As in when you refer to a point, you may ask, why assume this hypothesis, right? Why is this point, why is this argument used out of all the other arguments, out of all the other perspectives? Why is this perspective mentioned, right? Why is the author using this perspective only? And also here, I have just given an example from translation, right? So if a translation is considered, you can question if it is transparent or not. Because when you consider a translation, so there can be this idea of cultural untranslatability, right? Some concepts are not culturally translatable. We call that concept cultural untranslatability. So sometimes the authentic argument would make sense only if it is given in the authentic manner, as in using the authentic language, right? So likewise, so you can question those as well. Right. Yes. Okay. Yes, localization can be done as well. And you can also question that whether the text is localized and to what extent is the localization possible, right? And also, is it successful or not? So there are instances where localization can be very much successful, immensely successful. But also, on the other hand, some instances where it is not. Likewise, you can question all these things. So these are the marginal questions that you can ask. And also, you can propose different interpretive lenses when you are reading. So, what if read from the other tradition? What if read from another perspective other than the given perspective, right? Then you can understand the given perspective better as well without just blindly believing the given perspective. So, there are kind of, instances that sometimes you need to accept the given perspective. That is totally fine, right? And also, again, it is totally fine to read around the text, right? So this perspective is given, that is true. So that is the argument which is presented by the author. So what would be my take on it? Do I agree with it? If so, then you can build upon your argument on it. If you don't agree with it, right, then again you can build your own argument challenging that perspective, or else not kind of engaging in a battle or something like that. I'm saying not an intellectual battle, but then you can think in a different perspective of the same thing, right? Yeah. So again, so here you have another example. So let's consider, let's say, a religious festival, right? So then you can say, can we approach it through ritual studies? Can we look at this religious festival through the lens of ritual studies other than the textual analysis? Are we going to only analyze the textual data which are available about that religious festival, right? Or else, are we going to look at the religious context, the ritualistic context of it? Are we going to experience it as a lively experience? Then we can call it an ethnographic kind of a research as well, right? We are living through that experience likewise. And also, you can think about contrasting perspectives as well, right? So let's say you are reading several research papers, and then in one research paper, you come across one argument. Let's call it argument A, right? And then in another research paper, you have something related to the same concept, but again, it is totally different from the argument A, right? Then you get this insight, right, about contrasting perspectives about the same concept. There can be two different perspectives. There can be two much more than that, right? Paradoxical, contrasting perspectives, arguments which are pitted against each other, right? Things can be pitted against each other. Likewise, then you can engage in dialogic reading as well, right? And then we will move to reverse reading. Yes. So again, this is a method mostly used in the modern context. So this may sound odd, but it is again a very effective method. So some scholars argue that this reverse reading method flips or entirely changes the traditional approach to engage with scholarly work, right? So here what happens is, the reading happens not strategically, right? So let's say, in a way, it is not happening sequential, actually, not happening according to the, I would say, the order, according to the sequence, right? So you have to be very careful when doing this as well. So we have to be very sensible when we are engaging in research or whatever the method that we are using. So here we are not reading the article in a, I would say, a very conventional way. We are not reading it from the beginning to the end, right? So here, under this method, what you can do is, so you can read the conclusion first, right? So why do you think we are reading the conclusion first? What would be your take on it? Some of you? So some of you were silent today. What do we expect from this? As in, why do we read the conclusion first? What can we gain from it, as you think? Yes, Reverend Kusalanyana?
I think one use of it could be, it can save a lot of your time, because we don't know whether all the articles are relevant to your research. So you can get a clear picture that if whether this certain article is relevant to your research by reading conclusions and introductions first. But that is only one point of view about this thing.
Yes, Reverend, of course. Yes, it saves your time, of course. So you don't have all the time in the world when you are engaging in a research to read everything, read all the articles which are related to your topic. So when you read the conclusion, you can get a better idea whether this is worth reading or not simply, right? Yeah, I agree. And also another idea, something different from that. So don't you think that, yes, I have received a message here. Yeah. So you can decide whether it fits your research. Yes, I agree. And also, don't you think it kind of sharpens your focus? So what to focus and what not to focus? Because when you read the conclusion first, usually the conclusion section reveals the author's argument, right? The main argument, main findings, and also his or her claimed contributions. And that would happen before you encounter their reasoning process. So the reasoning process is there in the discussion. And then when you are reading an article from the beginning to the end, right, what would happen? You have to go through all these sections. I'm not advising kind of, to ignore reading the entire article. So still we are talking about the process of selecting articles to read, right? That day we started with it. How to select these articles. Then you can of course engage in a proper reading. So when you are selecting articles to read, as Reverend Kusala mentioned, we have to be very specific about our time. So because of that, at that stage, at that phase, you can use this method, right? So then it is easier for you. Then you know whether this is important. So we are receiving a message. Yeah, so you can understand what is mentioned as Miss Vatsala, yes, has mentioned. Yeah, so that means you become aware of the arguments which are presented by the author. You get this lucid picture, that means kind of a clear picture, a vivid picture. You get that. Then it is easier for you. As in, it is easier for your decision making. Before you enter the main reading stage, main reading phase, then it is easier for you, right? So, as we discussed already, right? So, you can ask yourself, do I find this convincing, right? Are these conclusions sound? Is this related to my research? And after getting that picture, then if you want, you can read the rest of the article, right? So then you have this question, what would it take to prove this argument? Then to get to know about that, you need to read the article. So before moving to that step, you can decide from reverse reading whether this article is worth reading or not. So after reading the conclusion, then you can, I would say, kind of do a reverse jump to the introduction, right? So when you move through the introduction, right? I'm not referring to the abstract if we are referring to a research article, right? So the introduction. So in the introduction, you can see how they have framed the journey, right? To reach that conclusion, right? So we need to understand here, we are referring to the introduction, right? Not the abstract. We discussed about abstracts, that they're reading abstracts. So via reading an abstract, you can get the whole picture, right? You can get the gist. You can get the main idea. It is more or less like a summary. But here it is not like that. You are starting with the conclusions. And then after that, you are moving to the introduction. When you go through the introduction, you can get an idea how they have framed this journey, how the writers have framed this journey towards the conclusion, right? So now you know the destination. Usually it is not like that, right? So even in life, so we just travel, we traverse along the path. We might not know the destination all the times. But here it is the other way around. So when you start with the conclusion, you know the destination. So with the destination known, you are evaluating the research paper. Then it is easier for you. Then you have the structure inside your head. So after the introduction, right? So we begin with the conclusion, then we reverse jump to the introduction, then we can move to or else jump to sections which are relevant to your research. So after you have read the conclusion and the introduction, you know what are the important things that I should pay attention to, right? So you don't have to read each and every word, right? So instead, you identify and jump to sections that matter for your purposes. So it can be a specific case study, right? Or it can be the theory that interests you, because in a research paper, there are several kind of, arguments or several, I would say, amount of data presented, right? So out of all these, you can pick what is necessary. You can hand pick what is necessary for you. And of course, it saves time, as Reverend also mentioned. And also, it sharpens your focus. So then you are not focusing on everything, right? So you can identify what is mostly necessary to you. Likewise, that is really important. So here, we have discussed around 4 reading methods up to now. So we started with this 5 pass model. We discussed about mapping that day. And also under mapping, we discussed how to engage in basic reading and then how we can move to this identification phase. And also we talked about argument tracing. Then also methodological reading, what are the methods being used? We specifically talked about some methods that day, close reading. Even though it is not mentioned here, we discussed about comparative analysis as well, discourse analysis, deconstruction, and how to reason out the method, right? And what does a text include and exclude? Those we discussed, and then critical positioning. And today we discussed about this last phase, which is research integration, about citing, challenging, as in challenging an argument and building upon an argument, and also discarding what is not necessary for you. Then also layered reading technique, and we will do a layered reading when we meet next Saturday. And also we discussed about dialogic reading. So you can use all these methods when you are engaging in research reading. And also we discussed about reverse reading. So we have around, as in more than 5 minutes. So we will move to the next part as well. Yeah. So there is this other method which is very significant. We call it citation-driven reading strategy, right? So it is more or less like beating around the bush, or we can call it reading around a text. You are not only reading the text which is necessary, or else the text that you have handpicked, that this is good for my research, so I have handpicked this. Likewise, not only that text, you are reading around that text as well, right? So here, this approach treats any single article as a conversation participant, right? So we cannot call any text that it is something isolated, or it is kind of a, let's say, a standalone statement. It is not like that. You are tracing this text's intellectual relationships, right? To understand what this text is really doing, you are tracing, right, the map of this research, map of the study that you are paying attention to. So there you have to think like, who does it cite? So when you consider a research paper, right, you can see that there are several other citations, there are several other references. So let's take an example. Let me share the screen. Yeah. So here, if we consider this article, right? So in this research article, you can see, so the writer's name is here, Creswell. So he has cited several other researchers. Here you can see Brown, Ludwig. Likewise, there are several other researchers. So we are not only paying attention to this paper, right? You can refer to this reference as well, right? You can pay more attention to the other writers, the other researchers who are mentioned in this research, right? So these are like this text's intellectual community, I would say, right? And also, on the other hand, who cites this article? So that again reveal the text's, I would say, intellectual descendants. And also there can be criticism as well. Not only, when you consider this research map, right? So some scholars have cited this with kind of a positive counter response. Some can be critical. Likewise, you can read around the text, right? So how do later scholars have used this? Have they used this as foundation, right? To build upon their argument. And also, which debates does it belong to? So you can kind of map the larger conversation network. This is like a conversation network, right? So these scholars have cited each other. So then you get this whole picture, the larger picture, not just a counterpart or a, I would say, cross-section of the idea. You are getting the entire picture. So that's why we say one article is kind of a node, right? It is not an island. So one article would be a node in the network, right? The entire network. So reading it in isolation is not necessary. So if you are reading a text in isolation is like hearing one person's statement without knowing the whole picture, right? Without knowing an incident. It is like that. So then you don't know what are the answers given. What are the agreements? What are the disagreements? You don't know. So that's why this reading around the text technique is also important, right? Then you can again get a better idea. I would say a wider idea as well. Right. Okay. So we have around 4 more minutes. So before we wind up, are there any questions? Any comments?
The last section or the last phase you mentioned, I think in order to do it properly, you may need to read the articles that are written by several writers, I think.
Yes, Reverend, in a way. And also, what I specifically mentioned is when you are referring to an article, what you can do is this is not something mandatory or compulsory, but to gain a better awareness, what you can do is you can refer to the articles which are cited by that scholar. Then you get a better picture. Then you open a door to, I would say, the outer area as well. You are not restricted only to the article that you are exposed to. Then you know what is out there.
So
Likewise.
So it means you don't need to read the articles of the other authors in that case necessarily.
Again, it is
Or do
not
you need to?
you need to reverence. So what I'm saying is then you can get a better picture. So let's say, so here I was showing you one article. So here in this article, which is written by this author, you can see several other scholars are mentioned here, right? So that doesn't mean you have to read each and everything, but you can refer to these people. You can just, click on this and then you are directed to that specific
That
article.
article.
Yeah, likewise. Then you get another perspective of it, maybe, and also something related to, right? So, likewise, then you get access to the entire network. It is like a research network. You are focusing on the other scholars who are related to this field. Likewise, I hope I'm clear there.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
I want to ask, in case one researcher has some information given orally to him by a monk or a scholar, having a conversation, and the scholar or the monk gave an idea, a very good idea to the researcher. Is this has to be mentioned in the research?
Of course, Mr. Michael, you can mention those. So you consider these people as key informants. You can collect data from them. That is totally okay. You can give them credits, as in I have seen in research articles, people have mentioned those key informants. You can mention their names. What was their argument? It is not like that. You don't have to limit yourselves only to the researchers. You can
Okay,
of
thank
course
you.
take, you can of course take the arguments. Yes. So someone is requesting the presentation PDF. I think it was already shared, Miss Chamila, but I think because you were an on-site participant, maybe you did not get it because it was shared via the Zoom inbox. Maybe I can share it to the WhatsApp group. I will just check the possibility. Okay, so yeah. If there are no more questions, then of course, yes, Mr. Michael, yeah.
Yes, please send us the link of the videos
Yes,
when you
yeah.
have available.
Okay, will do. I will do so. And also, I will send you a recommended reading list as well. All right. So if there are no questions, then we can call it a day. All right.
One
Okay.
question.
Yes. All right. In the chat box, let me check. Yes, you are asking what do we mean by a node? So a node specifically refer to kind of a point, right? So when we consider a map, right? When we consider a larger picture, one point of connection that you have there. So that is what we mention here as node. One article is a node. That means it is a point. If we kind of think of it in a simple manner, in simple discourse, that would be a point of connection. All right, seems there are no more questions, then we can call it a day. So we'll meet this Saturday then. Then good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night.
Good night, madam.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.